Some of you may remember when the Spurs arrived from the ABA in 1973. I do. At the time, I was an aspiring sports writer in ninth grade. My knowledge of the ABA at the time was limited to 3 stars: Julius Erving, George McGinnis, and George Gervin. I decided that if we got one of those 3 guys, I'd become a fan. Within 4 months, the Spurs signed Gervin. 6 years later, I covered my first Spurs game as a reporter for the Daily Texan, the student newspaper at the University of Texas. I interviewed James Silas for a feature story after a Spurs Mavericks game. It was published 45 years ago today on October 21st, 1980. My mother photocopied me a copy of the story, so here it is. From that first game in 1980 until now, I've been fortunate to cover the games of every Spurs player whose jersey hangs from the rafters in Bexar Center. From Silas and Gervin to David Robinson and Tim Duncan, 10 players in all. 2 years ago, I covered the rookie debut of Victor Wembanyama for the San Antonio Report. Barring injury, one day his jersey will ascend to the rafters as well. I can say, as few reporters can, that I literally grew up with the Spurs from age 14 until now at 66 years old. I've seen it all. 5 NBA championships, confetti falling from the arena, streets jammed with honking cars, parades on the San Antonio River, Hall of Fame inductions. It's been an incredible ride. And that is why we're here today, to talk about the Spurs. Now, I'd like to welcome to the stage San Antonio Report publisher Angie Mock, along with Spurs owner Peter J. Holt, and NBA legend and my friend, Sean Elliot. They'll discuss the Spurs' legacy and the team's future in San Antonio.
Thanks, Gina. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Angie Mock, and I'm the publisher and CEO of the San Antonio Report. Our nonprofit newsroom is dedicated to covering local news and elections. So let's start today's discussion with reminding you that early voting is now open for the November 4th venue tax election. On our website, you will find a detailed and nonpartisan voter guide, and that will help you really learn about the stakes of this vote and exactly what you're weighing in on. Our second panel today with Mayor Gina Ortiz Jones and Bexar County Judge Peter Sakai, happy birthday, Judge Sakai, will that panel will dig much deeper into those topics. But you know, a big piece of this conversation about a downtown Spurs arena is around the role a team plays within a community. So, from draft picks to development, an organization like the San Antonio Spurs both metaphorically and literally shapes a city. And to speak more about this dynamic, I'm just thrilled to be on stage with 2 hugely influential figures in San Antonio Spurs history. Peter J. Holt is the 3rd member of the Holt family to serve as chairman of Spurs Sports and Entertainment, continuing the Holt's 23-year leadership of the organization. And Sean Elliott is a 6'8" first round draft pick in 1989 who averaged 14.2 points per game. But you're literally known, I think, as well known in the community for the engagement work that's been a hallmark of since leaving the court. So please join me in welcoming our guests for today's CityFest. So I want to start with a little history. I don't want to miss a chance to ask you about the history of the Spurs in San Antonio. So 52 years ago, I think that was before you were born. possibly?
Me? Oh, is that even a guess? Dang, the vote's getting me gray. Yes, I was not born.
52 years ago, San Antonio auto dealer Red McCombs had a vision, and that led to an NBA team with 5 championships under its belt and a global brand that has become synonymous with San Antonio with our community. So I'll start asking either of you, what's your favorite Spurs memory?
Um, well, first, not to correct the journalist, but 30 years, the whole family has been in the ownership position.
Thank you.
But who's counting? And it's our family's most immense pride and joy to be stewards of the great Spurs, and the foundation that was built even before us, with Red and his family, was a combination of leading an organization with a community first mindset, a people first mindset, and also dreaming big. Thinking big, and having the generous audacity to believe that San Antonio deserves really great things. And so that foundation was built before we got involved, and we've been just incredibly mm, grateful for the blessings we've gotten over the past 30 years in return for the stewardship. So, you asked me before, what's your favorite memory? It's impossible for me to have a singular memory. Some people don't know this. I was actually born in Corpus Christi, Texas, and we moved here when I was very young, and the way that our family was invited and welcomed into this city were the Spurs. It didn't matter what neighborhood you came from or what city you came from. If you went to a Spurs game or a Spurs youth camp, you were welcomed, and you could share joy and sadness and frustration and excitement with anybody in the city. And so my earliest memories are some of my most favorite ones of chasing the coyote around the building, trying to pull his tail. That was always a fun time. I went to all the Spurs youth camps, played in the 3-on-3 tournaments in the hot Alamo Dome parking lot. But the memories from as maybe small as going to a Spurs youth camp, up to the big ones of riding in a river parade and seeing hundreds of thousands of people come down to celebrate with us, um, in a little place called downtown San Antonio.
Mine is really easy. Uh, but- and I know you're thinking the Memorial Day Miracle, but it was the '99 championship. When we won the game in New York, I think that is my greatest memory because it took a team effort to do that. And you had to bring a lot of people along for the ride. I've spoken to a lot of teams over the years, and I always tell a group of youngsters, I've never seen a guy at an MVP press conference spray champagne on himself. You do that when you're all together and you have this singular goal and you're just thrilled to bring everybody along for the ride because it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do in sports or in business. And I think a lot of the leaders here would understand that when you accomplish something together, it's much, much more gratifying than if you do something just on your own. And so I was thrilled for Big Dave because he deserved to win a championship. And I was thrilled for Avery Johnson and all that he had persevered throughout his career. And just that feeling, that emotion, I tell people all the time, when that buzzer went off, we were barking and yelling and crying at each other. We were speaking a different language. And that's the best feeling. We had let our fans down uh, so many times when we had the best record in the league, and we weren't able to get it done. And sometimes your belief can start to wane a little bit. But we believed in ourselves, and we finally were able to get across the finish line. And we always take pride in the fact that we kicked the door in. So that by far my favorite memory.
As you should take pride in that. Sean, you spent the majority of your career with the Spurs, but you moved here from Arizona as a rookie. As a transplant to San Antonio, can you speak to the kind of welcome you received and sort of talk about what it felt like to get involved in a new community?
Yeah, well, I was welcomed pretty much with open arms to San Antonio. Funny story, when I had my press conference and I signed I was getting ready to sign a contract. The Spurs gave me a whole sheet of copied newspaper articles, and I was reading them on the plane back home, and there were people like, "Oh, I like this pick," and there were a lot of people that said, "This pick stinks. Who is this guy?" Right? And I realized when I got here, well, when I watched TV, after the ACC's over, the Big Ten would come on, then no one would watch West Coast games. So a lot of people really had no idea who I was. But at the same time, there was a contingency of people, and there were people within the organization who really, really welcomed me with open arms. But like I said, when I spoke to City Council, I really came here. I knew nothing about the city. All I knew was George Gervin, Johnny Moore, Artis Gilmore, Mike Mitchell. Those were the guys that I saw on TV. That's all I knew about San Antonio. But it was apparent early on. Red sent me and he sent Pop on a little shuttle bus throughout South Texas to drum up support. And then when I got back during the season, we had a day off. The Spurs were asking me to go to an elementary school, a junior high school, a high school, a youth center to talk to kids. And the point of all that was not to sell any tickets. We're not trying to sell tickets to kids in junior high. We're trying to tell them to be the very best that they could be. So it was apparent that Red and Charlene wanted to use the Spurs as an instrument to better the community. And we got that sense right away. We were always active in the community. It wasn't, we were 2 or 3 or 4 days a month. And that's during the schedule where we're traveling and we're back home. We might have a day off. We were out doing things in the community. So it was very apparent that the Spurs really cared about their fans and the community.
Thank you. This is an exciting moment for the Spurs on the court. Another first round draft pick, Victor Wembanyama and Dylan Harper, among other young talents. They've injected the team, I think, with a whole new level of energy. And I'm curious how you see that enthusiasm translating into the San Antonio community.
Yeah, I think that rightfully so. Our fans have high expectations. Folks like RC Buford and Pop and the foundation that Sean and the '99 team set. We want to punch above our weight. Even though we're a small market and we're a constant underdog, that's okay. So I think it's awesome that our fans have high expectations for us, and we've got some amazing young new players surrounded by some vets and a new coach and coaching staff that has energy that's still supported by Pop and supported by RC. But I think that this season and going into the future, we've got a just tremendously exciting young core. And then I'll always have to add that not only are they exciting athletes and great players, and I think with a ton of potential, really good people, and they fit our values. I think they're going to extend our values. They're going to give back to our community, and for us, that's always been equally important to winning.
You mentioned it. We are seeing a generational change in leadership with Coach Mitch Johnson. He has the responsibility of taking over from the toughest act to follow in all of San Antonio, Texas, and that's Coach Greg Popovich. Um, from my days at the Boys and Girls Club of San Antonio to now, I've seen Pop quietly but very generously support local causes. Um, often very much staying out of the limelight when he gives. Can you both reflect on the role that Coach Pop has played in building the Spurs organization into what it is today?
Yeah, I can take that because Pop and I grew up together. Basically, throughout the organization, we really did. Um, I, Pop and I knew each other when we didn't have two nickels to rub together, and to see uh, what he's done with his success, he's only tried to enhance the lives of other people. Uh, Pop does a lot of stuff in front of the camera, and he did, but he does vastly more behind the camera. And the thing about Pop is he doesn't want to take credit for it. As a matter of fact, if he hears that I'm even talking about this, he may call me and chew me out. He just wants to uh, really remain behind the scenes, but he really has a real commitment to the community, and that's coming from where he comes from and his Air Force Academy influence. He's been a towering figure behind the scenes. There's so many people, I've heard so many stories where he's helped families out. He's been very personal with people who are in need, and of course, with a lot of organizations. Food Bank, Eric Cooper could probably tell you a lot of good stories about what Pop has done for them. And so Pop he's been really on a mission to spread the wealth, if you will, and really enhance the lives of other people around him. And it's hard for me to really imagine anybody doing more in the community than what he has done.
He's also generous with his time. You'll appreciate this, given your history. But when I was at the Boys and Girls Club, he came over to drop off a check one day, and I said, "Pop, do you mind going out in the club and saying hi to a few of the kids?" So we walk in this room, and one kid asked him, "Would you sign my homework for me?" So then the next kid and the next kid, and literally Pop patiently signed everyone's homework that day, Coach Pop. And all I could think about was the next day at school, what that teacher was gonna think.
Right.
Oh, he's so generous. But so okay, so now we have this new generation of team leadership and talent. How's that going to build upon that legacy and change going forward, do you think?
Well, I think the foundation of values is set, and won't change. At the same time, I think Pop is the first one to remind us that Pop wasn't Pop the winningest coach ever when he first showed up.
Mhm.
People forget. People have short memories. That when he was first hired, everybody said this is a terrible decision. Who is this guy? He's never coached in the NBA. Yada yada yada. And so um, the reason I say that is because the current players and Mitch, they need to be themselves. They were brought here. They formed a team. Mitch was put in his position because he's Mitch Johnson, not because he's Pop. And so they need to be genuine to themselves and build off of this foundation of values that is what Sean is saying. Selflessness, excellence, pound the rock. Those the foundation is there, but they need to build their own identity and be themselves, and that will take us to this next chapter of greatness.
Wonderful. So we had a story last week about how the Spurs have become a brand that's well recognized across the world, with games in Austin, Paris, Mexico City, team full of international talent. It's clear that you're working on building this fan base outside of the community. So can you talk about why that strategy is good for Spurs business?
Yeah, I think for a couple reasons. There's 30 NBA teams. We're the 27th smallest market in the 30 teams, and we've always had to find creative ways and collaborations to punch above that weight
Mhm.
class. There's not another team of our size that has accomplished what we have had on and off the court. And so we constantly have to think about creative ways to grow our business in a sustainable way, and attracting fans, attracting sponsorships, attracting markets that are global in nature will absolutely help us ensure that our business is sustainable so that we can always reinvest back into the team, back into the community.
I can piggyback on that too. I love to travel, and so I know a lot of people here travel across and abroad lots of times. I see more Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili jerseys overseas in Mexico than you will see any other player's jersey out there. So our marketing team, our strategy as far as making the Spurs a global brand is definitely working because what I see, especially I went to France 4 times in the last 12 months, actually, doing various things. All you see is tons of Spurs fans, people that are really intrigued by San Antonio. We have a contingency of Spurs fans from France that come down every March, about 50 of them, organize a trip just to come to San Antonio to watch our teams play. And that obviously had a lot to do, Tony had a lot to do with that, Boris had a lot to do with that, but it's also the organization and I believe what we stand for. People really respect our values. They respect the way the organization has been run. They respect the character of our players, and that's why I feel like we have more fans across the globe than almost anybody else.
That's incredible, particularly given the market size. Thanks for sharing that. So it is also worth noting that Spurs Sports and Entertainment isn't just basketball. You own San Antonio FC soccer team and the Austin Spurs, an NBA G League franchise. And through efforts, we've talked a little bit about this, but through efforts like Spurs Give and Spurs Impact, you've invested millions of dollars in this community. And so it'd be great if you can share how you determine your investments and priorities as an organization. Like, what are some of the causes you support and why?
Yeah, I think that one thing that we feel really strongly about is that the Spurs have this unique position in the community to be a unifier and to be a place where people can feel let their guard down, feel genuine, feel like themselves, and and I think that one thing that we've always wanted to do is try to have outsized impact on the size of our company, the size of our team, et cetera. And so I don't think it's just what the Spurs directly do, but it's the ecosystem that we try to build around us. We have two former players that have built at schools, George Gervin Academy and Carver Academy, some of the biggest lasting impact. And so we want to support not only what we do, but others as well in our ecosystem. And I think we really have intentional effort in that. But directly, we focus on building leaders and legacy mostly through youth sports. That's where our just comfort level is. That's where it makes sense. It's logical. Pop was a big promoter of the Drug Free League that really turned into our Spurs Academy that has thousands and thousands of kids and coaches go through that program. We're excited right after this event. We're going to announce the transformation of our practice facility. We're going to, instead of, probably the business savvy thing to do would be just to sell that building off and make some money off of it and move on to the Rock at La Cantera. But we're going to reinvest $10 million into that and make that a community center for teaching coaches and teaching kids the right way to not only show up in sports but show up in life. So I think we have whether it's direct or indirect, our number one priority is positive community.
Wow. Well, you heard it here. That is incredible. I've seen firsthand the power of the Drug Free Sports League. So, congratulations. That's really wonderful to hear. Um, One concern we hear often from the community members and longtime business owners is that San Antonio doesn't have enough corporate structure to sustain sponsorships and other kind of essential revenue for the professional sports teams we have, much less trying to attract new ones. Can you speak to the role of the corporate community in the Spurs' success as well as San Antonio FC?
Well, I would say, we have some of the best and most long-standing partners in across the league. If you look at our top partners in that space, HEB, Frostbank, Whataburger, that have supported us through thick and thin. And
Mm.
so we have tremendous supporters now. What you're speaking to is the breadth,
Mhm.
the number of companies that can pay the
Mm.
sponsorship to make it make sense for them and for us. And so that's why I'm a big advocate of what the county, the city, greater SATX is doing to try to grow our economy, to provide great jobs, upward mobility, and a rich, growing economy here that is beneficial to all. And that'll help us. I think that'll help everybody.
Awesome. We talked about this a little bit, but I want to go back and just sort of ask philosophically, how do you approach the question of what the Spurs owe the community that they call home, and how should sort of the business success have an impact on the success of the entire community?
Yeah, I mean, our philosophy is we reinvest all of our profit dollars back into the business or back in the community. That's our ownership philosophy. We've done that for 30 years, and I think that the reason we do that is because the community deserves an organization that represents them well, and I think that's on and off the court. And so we play as a team. We play hard. We're always going to play competitive, just like San Antonio does. And then off the court, we want to be part of progress, and that's why I think this next phase in our process of building a new arena as part of a sports and entertainment district downtown will be transformational not only for our urban core, but it'll be transformational for the rest of the city. So we believe it's a tremendous, exciting responsibility that we have, and we don't take it lightly.
That reinvestment that you're talking about, I'm just kind of curious how that compares to other NBA teams,
You
if
know,
you
I
know.
I I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. We have our philosophy, and it's worked well. We think that in general you don't have to sacrifice being good people to win, and
Mhm.
we've proven that, and we'll continue to prove that.
Sean, you mentioned your favorite memory, which is really well told. Thank you. I feel a little bit like I was in the room. Um, what are you most proud of in your time, in your long tenure? Proud of?
Move. What am I most proud of? Um, I'm just proud to be. I don't know if I can say I'm most proud of. I think I feel I'm so fortunate to be part of this. That's the biggest thing. When I first got drafted here again, I thought at the time, what happens if I go to the Lakers or I can go to the Miami Heat? How my career would be different. Uh, I'm just most proud of the work and the effort that everybody's put into making the San Antonio Spurs what they are today. You're talking about an organization. Uh, Peter was talking earlier about culture is set. Reminded me of a really great story that makes me really proud. It's the first time I got invited to the war room during draft night, and I've told this story before to lots of other organizations, radio stations. When I do interviews on the road, I'll tell this story when they ask about how and why the Spurs are so successful. And I remember I was sitting in the room and they had the board broken down and they had every position 1 through 5, and they had 30 names under each position. And the draft is going on, and my brother-in-law is texting me, and he's like, "Oh my God, this guy's available. This guy's available. We're going to get a really good pick." And I just happened to look to the left side of the room, and I didn't notice there was a little tiny chalkboard there on a tripod, and it had 15 names under it. And at the top of the chalkboard, it said, "Not a Spur." So it didn't matter how good you were, you had to have the right character. And so to me, that that story, that experience still resonates with me because we try to bring in the right people. We try to do things the right way, and we try to bring in people that are going to make the community proud, and try to bring in players that, as a parent, you can point to and say, "That's what you aspire to be like." So I'm really proud to be part of an organization that really values character more so than talent.
It's so true. I'm also a transplant, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, not a spur, or that's a spur. Well done. So, Peter, I have to ask you, if the Spurs don't get the investment you're looking from the city, the county, the voters, is it possible that the team as a
Yeah, I mean, I understand why it's an important question, but I've said this, when everybody asks that we're not focused on that. We're not focused on November 5th. We're focused on this election. I think it's really important. And we wouldn't be investing so much time and energy in the campaign and then so much investment dollars in the actual project if we didn't think that it was absolutely the right thing for the Spurs and the community. And so, I'm glad you brought this up because I think there's some common misconceptions that are still out there, unfortunately, about the project. And so I'd like to clear some of those up.
okay?
Um, the first is just the sources of funding. I think that there's confusion that if what you're voting on is potentially a tax on your own household in Bexar County, and that's simply not true. The venue taxes that come from the county are paid by tourists. Period. The end. Visitors come to our city. There's a tax on those visitors. That's what funds venue tax. Period. Stop. The other sources of funding are similar, right? With the the tourist taxes that will also be used to fund city, and then the property development around the community. The increase in that value will also go to help pay for the arena and the surrounding development. So there will be no uh, household tax increase as a part of this vote. That's the first thing that I think is most important, especially in the environment that we're in right now. The second thing is around the uses of those funds. Those funds are absolutely restricted by state law. We can't, the city can't, the county can't, the Spurs can't change that. And so the idea that we should, as a community, use those funds to pay for roads or pay for more police or mental health or whatever it is cannot be done by state law. So they're restricted funds. I think that's the second really big important fact to know going into this election. And then, I think just a couple other ones. There's been, unfortunately, too little explanation of the increase that the community will benefit from this directly. So there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars more sales tax generated from this sports and entertainment district that will go directly into the city and the county to help fund general uses, roads, police officers, et cetera, that we are all for. The other thing is there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue increase that goes to SAISD that I think badly needs some new funds. And so the tax abatements are not coming from the schools, and so the school will benefit tremendously from this new project. And then I think the other I think really important one, which surprisingly has become a kind of a curveball. I'll even correct my apologies. San Antonio reports reporting on this. The expense of the project of the water plant has been for some reason added to our project. Those are two separate issues. I mean, you can argue it any way you want. One is just to drive down and look at where it is. It's on the other side of the convention center for where we're building our arena. That water plant does not need to be moved for our project to be done. So the cost of that, if those upgrades need to happen, that's a totally separate issue. We do not need the water plant moved in order for our project to succeed. And then the final thing that I'll say is, our city deserves great things. Red McCombs took a big risk and brought the Chaparrals at the time to become the Spurs in San Antonio, and it's one of the most transformational things to happen to our city. And this investment that the Spurs, with collaborative partners like the city, the county, the rodeo, UTSA, that public-private partnership is the next chapter of the public-private partnership. Public-private partnership is going to be incredibly successful. And the reason why I know it's going to be successful is because we're not only investing uh, millions and millions of dollars, each one of us, as a true partnership should, but our hearts really believe this. And the city deserves this, the Spurs deserve this, we deserve this, and it's gonna pass.
Uh,
So I will say before you go next, we do need to wrap up, but I will say just got to do my job. That the San Antonio Report is a nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization. So we don't advocate for voting one way or the other, but we're so happy as a news organization to be able to bring an event like today. And of course, next you'll hear from. It is a complicated structure. And next, we'll hear from the judge and the mayor, moderated by Lee. But please finish us
well,
out.
let's not forget, because we talked about this earlier. This is a county vote. You have a lot of people in smaller cities around here in San Antonio that don't believe they can vote.
Yep.
And
That's
so
true.
I live in Olmos Park. I'm going to vote right after this. I'm picking up Claudia. We're going to vote. And so if you live in Olmos Park, Alamo Heights, these little
Castle
houses,
Hill, Chavano Park, all those places, all those small municipalities. If you're in Bear County, you can vote.
My son right there voted on his way here. So, thank you both so much for being here today for this essential conversation. Let's have another round of applause and welcome Ken Rodriguez back.
As our next panelist and moderator prepare to take the stage, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about our nonprofit newsroom. Since 2012, hundreds of thousands of readers in the metro area have come to trust and depend on the San Antonio Report for credible, fact-based public service journalism. As a reader-supported nonprofit newsroom, our coverage is never behind a paywall, but it's not free to produce. Our small staff works hard every day to bring you the most important stories about your community with a focus on local government, business and development, education, lifestyle, community health, and public safety. And when we're planning to host events like CityFest, or when we're working on the 9 debates in 44 days that we hosted this spring for the mayoral and city council elections, our staff puts in extra time and effort to do the essential civic engagement work you're watching on the stage today. If you aren't a member of the San Antonio Report, you can join us at any giving level that works for your budget. Every little bit counts, but monthly gifts are especially important to our newsroom so that we can plan for the year to come. We have a membership table that's set up in the foyer where our team will be happy to help to tell you more, or you can give now by going to sanantonioReport.org and clicking the donate button in the right-hand corner. I've worked here for the report since 2024, not quite a full year, but I've been writing for the report for more than a dozen years. I came to the report, I came to San Antonio because of the report's founder, Bob Rivardi, sitting right here in front of me. Bob hired me from the Miami Herald in 2001 to be a sports columnist at the San Antonio Express News. And I have since, I left the paper and I went into higher education and got recruited back as a freelancer and covered Spurs games and other sports stories, and came back finally as a culinary writer in 2024. So my heart has been here with the report for many, many years, even though I'm just full-time for the last 7 or 8 months. Now, I'd like to hand it over to our editor-in-chief, Lee Munsell, to moderate a conversation with San Antonio Mayor Gina Ortiz Jones and Bexar County Judge Peter Sakai.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ken. Sorry, we needed some fresh water bottles on the stage, so we'll get started. This is a key moment for both the city and the county. As we've already said many times today, early voting is underway in a November 4th election that offers voters their first and perhaps only opportunity to weigh in on a $1.3 billion NBA arena and East Side revitalization that were presented publicly just a year ago, despite we've been hearing about them for a long time. While the county's venue tax election is only over a portion of the overall arena funding, the city doesn't need permission to spend its $489 million arena contribution, so the success of Proposition B or failure will be one of the only barometers of the public support. Depending on whether voters approve $311 million from the county for the arena project, the people on this stage, along with the Spurs themselves, will be coming together to decide the next steps. So while this is a very complicated topic to tackle with our CityFest event today, it felt like the most important conversation to have at this moment on this stage. So our first question, we just heard about the role that the San Antonio Spurs play in this community. Obviously, this team and the city are synonymous, which makes the negotiations over a downtown arena incredibly emotional. A big part of each of your roles is to handle economic development negotiations, balancing incentives with job creation opportunities. It's always a delicate dance, whether it's Toyota or the Defense Health Agency. But when it's the Spurs looking to help fund a new arena, there's obviously a lot of emotion involved from elected officials and the community. Can you speak to the challenges of this moment that you face negotiating and trying to get a good deal for the city and the county when you're across the table from an organization like the Spurs with so much goodwill?
Well, let me thank the San Antonio Report for this opportunity to come speak to y'all. In regards to that really broad question,
Small one.
what needs to be determined is the value of the Spurs. The value of the Spurs as a major employer who creates a lot of jobs and economic development. We need to put the value to them as a corporate citizen. You heard the stories, and I can collaborate the value of Spurs in regards to their international brand. I've been to Japan twice for economic development, bringing in Japanese manufacturers, in fact, to our community. And they may not always know the Bexar County market, San Antonio market, but I promise you, all of them know about the San Antonio Spurs. And in Japan, Tim Duncan and David Robinson, their favorite players. We need to also look at the value of the Spurs as a philanthropic organization. And we heard from Angie Ma, former CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, what they do just on a daily basis as a routine, what they do as an organization, what they do as executive leadership, what they do from their coaching staff to their players, to the Coyote that is usually at some type of nonprofit event. From that value set, we then have to determine what is the community responsibility, so to speak, in regards to what value is for the Spurs, basically keep them in town. We've had that discussion now. And so as a county judge, I have to balance that with the fact that as county judge, my primary duty is to protect our community. And so I just want, as you heard, that's a complex equation, especially for the community at large. And that's the robust discussion we're having today in our community. We have a vote that has started. It will culminate on November 4th.
Mayor Jones, I'd love to hear your answer to the same question. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing you from my vantage point. But can you speak to the complication of this moment and how you handle that?
Well, thank you again, San Antonio Report. Thank you to our excellent servers, frankly, who've been taking such good care of us. It is very important for a number of reasons. Yes, I think we all share a very emotional connection to a team that is synonymous with our city and with the county. I think when I think about the responsibility I have to the city, it's really about making sure we're being good stewards that we have. And it is hard for me to not think about the things, the very strong financial headwinds that are coming our way as we also think about this generational investment. I think those are the things that we have to do, we must do in this moment in time, because it is a generational investment. Generational investment. And so, we can talk about the numbers if you'd like. The other numbers, though, that I'm very concerned about are, in fact, as I've shared for those that read my op-ed, the implementation of the reconciliation that we will see the impacts of short. That's to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, CHIP, SNAP, right? All the things many in our community rely on. Third most impoverished city in the country. As we're also looking at, and while I appreciate the city staff's plan to close the $150 million budget gap, it ain't closed until that budget's final. We literally just last week had our initial discussions on a tabletop at the Pentagon. We'd call these war games, but it's really about how do we think about these very consequential scenarios and how we can reduce those so we can prepare ourselves, best work with the county, best work with our community partners. They may also be impacted by some of these federal cuts. And so there we're looking at, if we lose half of our federal funding when it comes to mental health, when we lose some of the very critical funding for other things in our community, unhoused, for example, how do we so yes, that this is a very important kind of generational investment. There are also some things that are really showing us that we must be cautious about these investments because, as mentioned, it's not just the arena. I think, as Peter brought up, there are other things that also go along with a revitalized downtown that also have a price tag, even if it's not specific to the arena. It's a part of the entire plan, and I think that's how we have to think about this writ large. So it is complex given one, the financial situation that we are in, the one we expect to be in, not only 12, 24 months from now, as well as kind of the overall price tag for what a revitalized downtown might look like in light of some of the other bills, in light of some of the other needs in our community.
Yeah, much of our newsroom's work this election season has been explanatory in our voter guide and our write ups of both Prop A and Prop B. We've been trying to demystify a very complex conversation. Meanwhile, campaign literature makes it all seem very simple. But in a city where only 9% of voters turned out in May's crowded 27 candidate mayoral election, are you concerned that the complexity of our elections and ballot language is making it harder to engage civically than it should be?
Well, let me kind of unwrap the complexity. I believe the county venue tax election that we called and is ongoing, culminate on November 4th, encourage everyone, including all county residents, to go vote. We need to respect, obviously, the will and decision of the voters. But the complexity of this venue tax, the county venue tax, and that's all we're looking at. The referendum A, referendum B, is an opportunity, the revitalization of the east side with the tools of economic development. And what we do have an opportunity to do is with that revitalization, which I put as a first stipulation, referendum B then becomes an opportunity for the county venue tax to be used for new Spurs Arena, period. We're not involved with anything else. And so, yes, there's a complexity. Perhaps there's information, misinformation that is out. But for today, we have an opportunity to revitalize the east side, which in my opinion, by revitalization of the east side, we are revitalizing our city. And we have an opportunity to obviously, hopefully, engage the Spurs so that they remain a valuable partner.
Mayor Jones, how do you feel about the complexity of our elections? The complexity of just what's on the ballot. Are people confused? Do you find as you go into rooms, there's not a solid understanding of what exactly people are voting on?
I wouldn't say it's a complexity. I think there's a little bit of a I think about this at which this has transpired. Obviously, much of this happened before I and the city council got into office. So I think it's more about the as well as I think trying to really kind of I think, wrap their heads around how this may be different than previous offers that sound very so it was, I was just talking with somebody yesterday about even the ballot language, right? $311 million is not in the ballot language. That for them was surprising not to see. So I think for many folks, it's a combination of that have led to kind of this moment. I think though at the heart of it is really people just feeling it themselves. 20 bucks today doesn't go as far as 20 bucks went, right? So as we're thinking about this generational investment in light of the financial headwinds, is this the right time in light of the benefits that have been kind of articulated and sound similar?
Judge Sakai, can you speak to the larger vision of the East Side project? There's still frustration that the current Spurs Arena area didn't deliver on what some hoped
That's true.
development would look like on the East Side. So, how is the development that we're talking about with the rodeo as an anchor tenant? How is that in line with what East Side residents want to see? Is it in line with what they'd like to see?
Yes, I believe it is, but we are just starting that process. When I first became aware that the Spurs in the city were engaged in moving out of the Frost Bank Center, I could have sat there and said, well, what can we do? But I chose to be proactive, engage, and develop a plan. We have a plan, and I also insisted that the revitalization of the east side, which was a promise made earlier, needed to be done in order to deal with the pain and anguish to those east side residents, in order to get the buy-in. We have an opportunity now with both referendums, with the other major tenant, the San Antonio Rodeo, to put a business plan so that we reformat the Frost Bank Center. I cannot allow the Frost Bank Center to become the next Astrodome. You know what that means? It needs to let there sit and just deteriorate. Two is we have an opportunity that's the San Antonio Rodeo that makes nearly their economic benefit is $375 million on an annual gross. They've projected with a year-round business plan that they have put out, what they design, they can double that. The rodeo also actually gives $12 million a year currently to scholarship. And some of those kids are at Sam Houston High School, they are at St. Philip's, and they're at historically Black colleges. And you know why? Because I've been to those scholarship awards. I see those kids. And finally, we have a situation where can we reimagine the Coliseum grounds as it is now? You've been to the rodeo, you've been to the Spurs, you go and leave. And reimagine the asphalt, the concrete, and the barns with dirt floors with a redone campus so that can we reimagine that county facility to be a Pearl-like environment where people will come and spend the day. We obviously got to green it up, got to put some parks in there. We have to add additional venues in there in order to accomplish this. Another discussion that's totally separate and apart, my discussion for the Willow Springs Golf Course across the street, which is city-owned. I hope to, if we can move forward, we can have a discussion of what that can be as a tourist destination. Why can't, with the Salado, beautiful Salado Creek, reimagine that area so that it becomes the next JW Marriott TPC, or it's a Hyatt Hill Country golf course? Can we reimagine the east side that if we continue to use the tools of economic development, that we can deindustrialize? What do you mean by that? We know that it's landlocked, mainly with warehousing. Why can't the city and the county partner up on a plan to move out some of those property owners so then we can then address those requests by our community? Where's the affordable housing? Where's the hospitals? Where's the clinics? Where's the police station? Where are these community? And then we then remake the east side. And as we do that, we bring growth. And I truly believe we have to recognize, and that perhaps is the complexity or the confusion, we need growth in order to be able to build these things that the community is asking us. So that's my vision, my dream for the East Side. Fulfill and deal with the pain and anguish that we should have done 20 years ago. But how do we do that? We got to get it into contract. Okay, the lawyer judge on me says, I'm going to put that all in a contract. There is much work to do to make sure that we take care of all the people of our community.
Mayor Jones, I'm curious your thoughts. You've spoken a lot about the federal landscape and the challenges of this moment. One thing that I feel like we haven't heard much about is the land bridge, for example, which is still in the renderings of the sports and entertainment district, relied on a Biden era push to reconnect communities separated by freeways to their downtowns. Is that even a possibility in this changing federal landscape?
Well, I'd call somebody, but there's no one there because the federal on, unfortunately. And so that's part of the uncertainty, right? I know a lot of that to your point, was dependent on a federal grant. I think, staff is being rightfully cautious about expending any funds, and funds will come.
Well, let me add on to that, Lee. The headwinds that are coming, and especially what the mayor's pointing out with the government shutdown, we have headwinds that are going to impact us pretty quickly, if not now. So this is a bit of a down discussion. What does that mean? Food insecurity. We're going to have to deal with that now in the immediate future if we're headed towards those dark times. We're also going to have to deal with housing, people perhaps not being able to stay in their homes. We're also going to have to deal with access to health care. So local governments, be it the county or the city, are going to have to step up. I don't see the federal government stepping up, at least not now, with the shutdown. And we hope that we can then partner up. And that's the reason why I believe that this discussion today is so vital, because we need a public-private partnership. I'm going to have to go out to the private sector and say, I can do this. What can you do? And that's the reason why major employers such as the Spurs, USAA, Valero, on and on, those big major corporations that give much, we're going to have to really tap them and say, what can we do for the least of us? That's for the children and families in our community that are suffering. I would submit we're going to have to deal with that right now.
We remember covering both of your campaigns during which you were both very clear about the fact that you wouldn't just support development projects unless you were convinced they were in the best interest of the community as a whole. I remember having this conversation with you several years ago. Mayor Jones, you were also very clear about that. Now, this downtown arena project, East Side redevelopment, have fallen into both of your laps. It's happening now. The conversation is happening now. Judge Sakai, you seem to have been brought along on the argument that this project is in the best interest of the community. Mayor Jones, what do you still need to see happen before you'd agree?
Well, I think what's important is to also make sure that folks know that there's going to be a San Antonio on November 5th, regardless of the outcome of the propositions, right? I think it's really important that we continue to negotiate, to make sure that there are several project agreements that, should proposition be passed, that we still need to finalize. The term sheet is non-binding at this point. That 489, that 49 is there, right? And we want to make sure that we've got a really strong commitment on a community benefits agreement. I think there may be some potential room there, very optimistic. I think it's important that, as we're also looking at, again, not just the arena, but also kind of all of downtown, I was surprised to see that in these generational investments between the arena and the baseball stadium, one of the number one issues our folks bring up to us is housing affordability, right? And when they say housing affordability, not everyone wants to live in Alamo Ranch, right? Some people want to live closer to the downtown core. So how can we think about these projects as a way to meet some of these other needs that are so critical in our community? So I'd welcome looking at what affordable housing might look like in our community as part of these projects, as part of our revision, revitalize downtown. Because I have seen, again, I think it's important in San Antonio that we also kind of lift our heads up sometimes and look at, well, how else is everyone else? Right? What did that Miami-Dade County naming rights look like, where 17 years, 117 million, 2 million goes to the team, the rest of that goes into the general fund. I look at the arena deal in San Diego, where they redid their own arena there, kind of similar size to what I think is envisioned for the new Spurs arena. Interestingly enough, in talking with that mayor, no one is talking about that arena. They are in fact talking about the 5,000-ish units of housing right next door. Oh, by the way, roughly half of those are affordable housing, which now makes it California's largest affordable housing project in the state's history. So I think I see lots of opportunity with continued negotiations on again, regardless of the fate of Proposition B. And I think that's what the
Thank you, Mayor, because you have brought up another example of where we're at. We're going to get a new baseball stadium. That was with a county, city, baseball ownership, and the SISD school district partnership. And it went through a robust discussion, much as we're going through now. But what I'm most proud of that agreement, it's not that we're going to have a new baseball stadium, but it is the potential, the revitalization of the downtown through that baseball. $1 billion that Weston Urban, Graham Weston, will put in as a stipulation in order to get public financing through bond, no homeowner property tax, through the TERS, the tax increment reinvestment zone. Don't ask me to explain all that today, but it's an opportunity that we got a public-private partnership. But the best piece of that was the hard tactic negotiation. I'll say that because SISD really pushed hard, was for the affordable housing component. Bexar County just passed, just last meeting, the Bexar County Housing Plan that will align with the City of San Antonio Strategic Housing Implementation Plan, the SHIP, to build the urban core with affordable housing, to bring children and families back in to SISD, the Harlandales, the Edgewoods, the South Sand, because that's the only way they're going to stay viable. I'm tremendously concerned about what the urban core, those public school districts, are going to be on the long term. Demographics means student enrollment will continue to decline. And so unless we strategize with a public-private partnership, such as affordable housing, then as I told you earlier, status quo is unacceptable. So with that plan, the county is vested to bring, and it's been a shift in policy of the county. We haven't looked at the urban core. But that's what I felt was invaluable as a result of those negotiations. And I have no doubt that continuing negotiations with the Spurs, with the city, county, are going to prove and provide a long-term sustainable plan that will be good for the entire community.
happy to talk about the TERS. So the TERS is important, tax increment reinvestment zone, right? One of the key ways, one of the four components that contribute that makes up the city's contribution. And that's important because we just had our FY26 budget. We had a little bit of a gap. We have a $150 million gap in FY27. And again, there's a plan to close that. However, if we are not successful in helping ourselves, that gap grows to $220 million by 2030, right? So as the mayor, those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about. And so I am very involved and understand the TERS because that is money ultimately, again, that stays in that same area that would help to finance the arena, and that's important. But we also should understand that is money that is then not coming into the general fund, help us pay for other things. So we are foregoing other things to make up that contribution. And again, making sure that we're all clear about that, right? Because again, we have to close the gap somehow. I don't want to raise property taxes. No one wants to do that, right? There are expectations, there are needs in our community. How are we going to close that? Which is why I come back to what are the things, what are the aspects of this deal then that can help us strengthen our naming rights does that.
Well, the TERS are meant to sunset after a certain period.
They're meant
of time.
to. That's right.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah.
They're being extended in a lot of cases by the city. How does that work?
Well, and thank you for raising that. And this is why I asked Eric and the team for us to have a strategic discussion at the city council during budget session on TERS. Like, how do we think about them? I think we all understand, their value and an important tool to bring up blighted areas. To your point, they're not supposed to go on indefinitely, right? We want to make sure that we are considering other things that may in fact be able be financed through resources that otherwise would stay in that area, if not come into the for all the things that people care about, right? Police officers, libraries, seniors. I think we are just, I think having, and ensuring, frankly, there's also sufficient elected representation across all of those to ensure that there's that oversight that the people would expect given the resources that are, again, not coming into general fund. So I think we're at the, and I'm just talking about the city initiative, not talking about the other developer ones. But I think now is the time in light of that budget gap that I think as we go into FY27, I've asked Eric and to kind of help us think through a more strategic way in which we consider, do we approve that TERS project kind of right onesies and twosies, or is there maybe a more strategic way in which we can look at all of these projects in the aggregate and then also look at some of the other things. And so, we were during that conversation we were talking about some TERS funding that was going to go to again some gorilla habitat, right? And that's great, cool. Like housing for gorillas is great. I also would prioritize, however, like housing for people. So literally that afternoon, I was at a town hall Lion Center on the south side, and I was doggone yelling into my mic because the HVAC system was out. And so again, when you see like that. And then when you see resources, I'll just say diverted or not coming into the general fund that would allow us to more expeditiously tackle some of those projects, it does beg the question about, okay, what is how do we prioritize these things and how do we determine if we want to commit to the initial sunset date or if we in fact see there is a greater, not localized value, but community value to keeping those resources. Otherwise, we have to think about and then explain to people why we're investing in gorilla housing and not senior.
And the TERS is one of the tools in the toolbox. That's the reason why the county venue tax is another tool, because it is a tourist tax. Peter John already explained that. So it's a hotel occupancy tax, it's a rental car tax. It's not on the homeowner property tax, zero impact on homeowners, renters. So these are the tools that the mayor has and I as a county judge have in order to provide growth and long-term sustainability for our entire community. That's what I hope our voters will understand, that this is an important election and it's up to them to make the right decision.
I mean, the other important tool here is obviously the project finance zone. And these are resources coming from the state, $2 billion over 30 years. And in the city's case, right, allotted rather around on 3 projects. So the arena, the convention center, Alamo Dome. That PFZ can in fact though pay for infrastructure. So when folks are reading about, the infrastructure bond that would be needed to support the revitalized downtown, and that first one, that means there's one, right? That first one, 20 to 2. I think there is some question of, well, why the PFC can pay for that? Why are we using infrastructure? So I think to your question earlier about the confusion, I think it's more explaining why the have been allocated, or the suggestion by the staff is that they are allocated when they're in fact a different that infrastructure. And again, I mean, the budget season was tough, and it's going to get tougher. When they laid out our bond capacity, were to look over the last historically, right? 2017, 100 million, 2022, 1.2 billion. Historically, we should be at 1.9 billion. But if we were to have a bond today, our capacity is 500 million. So, I mean, that's like saying you're gonna go to HEB with $20 and actually your car is only good for 5, right?
Oops.
Right? So people want affordable housing bond. Folks want, a bond for infrastructure, a bond for other things, and of course, bond to support the revitalized downtown. So now it's about prioritizing those things in light of the financial realities that we.
Got it. We live in a moment, whether it's fair or not, where there's significant public sentiment
Yeah.
that government does first and asks questions later. We're having this conversation just weeks out from the first public vote on the Spurs Arena. It's already underway. And there's a study being done to move the sauce chilling plant that's been discussed already today. The Institute of Texan Cultures is being raised as we speak. What needs to happen to regain the public's trust that the government is listening to their input?
Me- I think what's important today is that we must, as a community, achieve success. What's success? Success is respecting the will and the decision of and then determining what is our strategic plan to respect that, no matter how this vote turns out. I just had a recent conversation with Cops Metro. It was a great conversation.
They're a real undecided group.
And we agreed to disagree, but it was respectful. And my final statement to them was no matter the outcome of this election, what is most important, what I define as success, that we come together as a community, unify common goals, common good, common purpose. They have done a heck of a job of protecting the least of us. And I will continue to do so as your county judge. So that's where we found common ground. Got different opinions how we do that. But that is what I believe success is, no matter what the outcome of this election. But this election goes to the hands of the voters. So my final comment, you got to vote and you got to exercise your voice. And that's the reason why I hope, no matter what, especially in light of today's world and the headwinds and the trials and tribulations, we know, it's failure that teaches us those life lessons. It goes back to the Spurs lesson of pounding the rock. Not going for the win on one game. All those efforts we do as a team to achieve the ultimate success was an NBA championship. And I know the Spurs are on that track. But as a community in regards to this particular referendum, must come together. That's my hope and desire. And as your county judge, I am committed to do is to bring us together and find those common purposes, those common goals, those common issues that will bring us together.
Well, I think that includes at this point, kind of helping folks understand what the path forward looks like. And that's what I tried to lay out. We continue negotiating, right? If it passes and if it fails, and if the Spurs wish to continue doing so, we also continue to negotiate. There's nothing preventing us from. I think the other way in which we regain and keep that trust is by showing them we've done our homework, done our due diligence, right? And have laid out and have done the work rather that shows that this is in fact the highest rate of return for their hard-earned money in light of all the financial challenges that we just discussed. So I think there's not an insufficient appreciation for the emotional here with voters. I think they also want to make sure though that this is the best investment for the city. So I think those two things: laying out the vision, negotiations continue. And then secondly, having shown that we've done our due diligence, getting as good of a deal and a win-win really, and for the Spurs.
Thank you both so much for being here today. Thank you all for attending. I'm going to invite Ken Rodriguez back up. I also want to thank the Spurs for our previous panel, but please thank our panelists for their conversation today.